Hello, and welcome to the Conversation Cabinet. I'm Ethan.
And I'm Josh Reames.
Today we have got a very good episode for you. Dr. Luke Evans, how are you doing today?
I'm very well. Thanks for having me, guys.
And thank you for joining us in CCHQ, no less.
Yeah, you managed to wangle your way in to be in the basement of CCHQ.
Got there just about after some trains this morning.
Yeah.
But we got here.
Yeah, we gave a nice little chat to some people here who are having a little visit, which is lovely.
Fantastic.
Ran into Connie, who you will see on an episode coming up. Yeah, it's been good. Well, thank you for joining us.
You're most welcome.
So today we want to talk to you about the relevance of the Conservative Party to young people. So, straight into the nitty-gritty of it.
Wow, let's dive in. Where do you want to start?
Well, could you just tell us, first of all, just an underlying kind of statement. Why do you think that young people should vote Conservative in 2025?
For me, I think the biggest thing then you're starting to see is the classic one is the policy of the economy. What does that look like? And that is undeniably something that's going to get more and more difficult and so wake more and more people up. The other one is, I think you're seeing more of a chance of personal responsibility. A lot of people talk about their rights. A lot of people don't talk so much about responsibility that goes with that. And actually, I think, to me, it seems the young people I speak to, they don't want a handout. They want abilities and opportunity to be able to get forward. So providing that ladder is really, really important. If you give them the agency to be able to do so as a government, actually allowing you to succeed as far as you can is really, really important. That, to me, is the envelope to push, because at the end of the day, the state can't do everything for you, and nor should it. It should encourage people to be able to take their control of their own destiny and give people the opportunity. I think that's the way I sort of frame it from that side of things. I often liken it to if you go to the pub and you're buying a drink, everyone knows they have the right to buy their drink, but they've also got a responsibility once they've ordered to step out the way to allow someone else to come behind it. They often forget that bit. And that's the element, I think, that if we talk more about personal responsibility, what you can do for yourself, your community, your family, actually there's a long way and there's a lot of traction in that, because I think that's what young people seem to want to gravitate to in my eyes.
It's really good having those values, but I think most people listening would have grown up most of their life with the Conservative Party in power. And I think especially over the final years of their tenure, they didn't have the best reputation for either accountability or strength of state or whatever happened, that they were, I don't think people have much faith in the current Conservative Party or the one that was in governance when they were younger. What would you say to people like that to make sure that they could be reassured if they do want to vote Conservative but unsure of the current party?
Sure. I mean, and I think there's an element of truth in what you're saying from there. Definitely, the Conservative government ran out of steam after 14 years. It's hard to govern the whole time to keep it relevant. So actually, we got to remember there was 4 election successes along the way. So that's quite impressive. Everyone jumps into, 14 years, how dreadful. Well, no, actually, you think of some of the wins, the headwinds from 2010 onwards and what the Conservative government achieved. Actually, that's quite impressive. When you compare it to Labour, who've now only been in for just over a year, and how they're capitulating, actually, you can clearly see how difficult it is to run the country. So I think there's an element in that. That's why you're not seeing Kemi come out immediately with sets of policy straight away. And I think that's the right thing to do, because the problem is, if you look at Keir Starmer, when he became leader, he had 10 clear points of what he wanted to do. All of them have been jettisoned to some degree, if not in their entirety. And that's because we're 4 years on and the country changes. So I think it's that broad direction where you need to be, yes, you need to have some policy side. Otherwise people say, what the hell do you stand for? But at the end of the day, if you go too into that much detail, then people won't believe you when you get there. And trust was the biggest thing. I wrote an article exactly that, saying part of the biggest problem is, as an MP, I was often asked, which family are you in of the 5 Conservative families? And I always used to think that's really odd. I'm a Conservative. We all should be working together. We're a broad church. Because if we don't trust each other as MPs, then you can't work together to come up with a cohesive answer. If you can't come up with an answer, you can't come up with a policy base. If you can't come up with a policy base, well, you can't govern. And the public rightfully look at you and go, well, why the hell should we trust you?
Yeah.
And I think that's fair. And so that's what you're seeing work through at the moment. The problem is people have gone, well, you had 14 years and it sort of fizzled out. We're now looking at Labour and we definitely don't like them. People are looking elsewhere to Greens, Jeremy Corbyn, Reform, Lib Dems. And that's the challenge we're facing from the Conservative Party side of things.
I mean, a lot of the rhetoric around towards the end of last year, as the last Conservative government collapsed, was that now Labour has to pick up the pieces of 14 years. Obviously, you must have heard this 14 years of Conservative tyranny rhetoric so much. But do you not think Labour have inherited some, like this black hole and things like that? Do you not think they have to pick up the pieces?
Not in that way, but no, I mean, let's face it. When we came in 2000 and 10, the country had borrowed 158 billion to deal with the financial crisis. Then had the pandemic where we borrowed over 400 billion to deal with it. Then you had the energy crisis where we used 90 billion to bail out people for their energies and protect them from that side. Yeah, there's hell of a headwinds when you've got war in Europe, in Ukraine going on with it. The country had started to stabilize. You saw inflation back at 2%. We were the fastest growing country in the G7. So actually there was signs of where things were going. Taxes were being cut. You're right. There were still problems to be there. But the classic answer of this 22 billion pound black hole was blown apart by the OBR who wouldn't back it up. Slightly, there's a little bit of politics being played in this on both sides, to be honest, because you were coming up to a spending review. So it's easy for us to say from the Conservative side, well, we hadn't set it out because you're waiting for a spending review. They can argue, well, you hadn't set it out because there wasn't a spending review. So it's tit for tat on that basis. What you can categorically say is things have got much worse since Labour have been in. Now, the question is how much is attributable to them or the world situation? I know where I stand on that, but that's what for the voters to decide.
Yeah. At the time, as you said, it's not a great time for Labour at the moment. I think they're doing pretty poorly at the polls. And so it almost is prime time for the Conservatives again to become something that people see as a favourite party. But obviously you've got the Rise of Reform, you've got your party, Green Party with Zach Polanski now, you've got all these different leaders coming through and wanting to be this next big party. What do you think the Conservatives' direction should be in the next couple of years if you're wanting to have a government tenure once again?
Yeah, we've just talked about trust and building credibility. Number one, I think we have a brand issue from the starting point. I think already I was amazed in the election, just as the election happened and afterwards, the number of people who found me afterwards was like a pressure valve released. I go into my constituent and they say, actually, the Conservatives are out, but actually we're glad you're still here kind of thing. Yeah. And there was no animosity. There was no hostility. It was right now, where does the country go? I think there was a freshness to the public there. We've therefore got to build that credible brand of what that looks like. And if you rush into it, I often liken it to the Olympic sports cycle. There's no point in peaking now when the Olympics are 3 years away. You want to build up towards it, get it all right, get the training right. Unfortunately, whether I like it or not, the next general election is likely to be 3 years away. So you've got to build a credible base so that when the public turn around and say, well, what do you stand for? We can stand the test of time and scrutiny on that basis, because actually that's when the trust avoids. If you're found wanting again on that, the public won't forgive you. And rightfully so, because you've had your chance and you blew it. So I think Kemi's right to be very cautious on that and think things through. So when you come up with a solution, it's not another gimmick. That's the danger. And I think the public are alive to that. But as we've seen across the world, politics change very quickly and you're seeing that move on. So from our side of things, if we're slow and steady and build those credible policy bases that work on it through the likes of the economy, I think actually you'll start to speak to people, because it doesn't matter which side you're on, the left or the right. The economy is usually a uniter of how people, there's a space to fill in that, in my eyes there.
Do you think that the Conservative Party are rebranding in the right way to then peak when it's needed?
When you say rebranding, what do you mean?
Making themselves more relevant. Because at the end of the Conservative government, I think lots of people were very disenfranchised. They were very kind of unmotivated when looking at the Conservatives. Do you think you are now as a party getting yourself together, uniting more, because there was obviously a bit of division, so almost becoming the Conservatives once again?
Yeah, I think you're seeing that unity come forward much more. I think there's a realisation, look, let's be frank, there's only 121 of us there, and well, less now actually with a defection as well. There is a realisation that we need to pull together. That's an opportunity and a risk. We're at the lowest we have been for a very, very long time, in decades. But that also means that you can be more nimble, pull together and start to rebuild. And I think you're seeing that. What I think you've seen is we've been effective opposition, holding people to account on winter fuel, the farmers' side, what's going on with Chagos, all these kind of things that the public go, oh yeah, we get this, what is going on? And then the economy about raising taxes, putting taxes on hospices, putting taxes on GPs, things like that. People go, hang on, how does that grow the economy? So people wake up to it. What they haven't done yet is go, okay, but you're the credible alternative. That's the next phase for us to work to say, well, why should we come back to you? And yes, there's definitely work to do. But I think everyone on the Conservative side holds their hands up. We know that in normal times, as the main opposition, you'd get the benefit of your government having a tough time. That isn't happening at the moment. It is going to reform, but I don't believe reform have the answers. And we're starting to see that with some of the way they run councils, for example. And when people say, when you're in power, what are you actually going to do? How does this work? And that test, that scrutiny is important.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you said, there's been defections to reform. Again, as you said, they are not perfect, and I think they could be a very credible threat in the next general election. Even if they are doing things in councils that could be seen as detrimental, I don't think some people will actually look at that and say that it's going to be bad. They'll kind of bat a blind eye to it, and they'll still vote for Nigel Farage. What would you say to people like that, or people who are interested in the character of Nigel Farage, who has this populist rhetoric? What do you think is?
So I think it's a combination of things, and I think that sunlight is disinfectant on their policies is important. But you're absolutely right. I always remember this in the Brexit referendum, where people who wanted to remain turned around constantly and said, "But financially, this, and the numbers say this." But actually, I voted leave. That was important, but not so important to the heart of being the master of your own ship and the master of your own destiny. And if you don't get that emotive angle and the reason there are some things bigger than money, then actually you're not going to catch fire. And what we're in danger of with reform is people are going, we're sick and tired of what we've seen. We want something new. The question is, from our side, is how do you make sure that you expose what that new really is, what it will really deliver, and what it really looks like without people actually seeing it? From our side, on the ground, you've got to build up credibility. So I spend a lot of time trying to be a good local MP, making sure that people know I will sort their issues out, I will represent them. And even if we disagree, they understand why and what we're doing and what we're doing it for. Then from the air war side of things, that's when you've got to have a credible set of policies that people go, do you know what, this will make my life better, will be better for my opportunities and my family, and be believable on that basis. So those are the areas that you need to try and push back at reform. Let's not forget that reform had 5 MPs. Yes. They lost 40% of them. They lost 2 of them relatively quickly within the first year. So they are on a high tide and a rising tide at the moment, but they're also having their difficulties. And the bigger you get, the more difficulties you have as well. That's self-evident from the Conservative side with our big majority, with Labour currently their difficulties. And if reform continues to get bigger, you will see scraps come out, I'm sure.
What is it that's so attractive about reform for clearly a quite significant demographic of people in the UK?
Clearly, I mean, it's easy to some commentators also try and poo-poo this, and I think that's the wrong attitude to take. They've clearly caught on to something that some of their policy bases cut through to the public. They are worried about immigration. They're worried about the state of change in their area. They're worried about being taken for granted by politicians who've been there previously. Actually, in politics, the reason we have these topics, they are difficult to sort out. That is why, be it the NHS that I spend a lot of time looking at, be it immigration, there's no quick solutions. People will look for them. And if you can say something trendy, without the scrutiny, often it will jump immediately at you to say, oh, that sounds a good idea. Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we putting, the Navy straight into the channel or just turning the boats back? Well, when you turn around and say, well, it's British water up against French water, you've got a responsibility under international law. Now, there's a question whether you change the international law, but then that opens a whole other can of worms. So this is where we go around in circles with it. So it isn't. And I think coming from a medical background, this is where you spend your time explaining to people about their medical condition, what you can and can't do, what the options are. It's up to them to choose what they want to do, but spelling it out clearly, the pros and cons of what this looks like and being able to back that up is really important.
I mean, you are a doctor, and you just mentioned about the NHS. A lot of people have attributed the slowness of the NHS at the moment, or issues, I should say, to immigration. People have used immigration as almost like a source of the majority of the problems at the moment in the UK. As someone who obviously has experience in being a doctor, do you think that's the case? You've got the best of both worlds, politician and doctor.
Best or worse. So I'm at the top of the popularity and the bottom of the popularity in both sides. I mean, as with all these things, it's multifactorial. Immigration, if you're letting in more people into the country as a net gain, yes, there's going to be more people in there. Flip side, remember, a lot of people come in to work in the NHS. But also the biggest thing is we've got an aging population. Yeah. That is the number one thing, which means if people are aging more, they have more comorbidities, so they're more unwell, they have more diseases because they're living longer. This is a good thing, but that's more problems. We've got advances in technology as well of what you can do in medications and these kind of things. So that's all going to put an added demand on it. And that's the difficulty that everyone is struggling with. And we're often, and rightfully so, looking at what goes on in the UK. Every developed country across the world is struggling with this same thing. How do you deal with both social care and healthcare, especially as we're on the verge of individual genetic medications and things like that, which will come in the next 10 years? How the hell are we going to afford that? How will we make sure it's equitable for everyone to get there? And what does the system look like? So yes, immigration is the easy scapegoating. And I hate those people who turn around and say, well, you could just poo-poo it. You're being racist. You're being bigoted. No, because fundamentally, if you're importing 500,000 people in, there's going to be pressure on. It's a numbers game. But at the same time, you can't just go, oh, it's all because of the immigrants' fault. So I sit somewhere in the middle. This is where you're buffeted from both sides, because you're trying to be pragmatic and say, well, of course it's a problem, but is it the main problem? Probably not.
What would you say the main problem is facing a country at the moment? Do you think there's one, or obviously there's a broad facet of what is affecting our country at the moment, but what do you think is the biggest form of civil unrest?
We don't know what Starmerism is. What's the vision? Where are we trying to get to? I think for me, that's what is lost. Because if you don't have a vision of where you're trying to get to in the country, what it looks like, people can't say, yes, that's what I like, or no, that's what I don't like. And it allows you to then have a debate on how you should get there and what you're doing. I don't see what Keir Starmer's vision is. If you even think to what his slogan was change, but he never really said what change was for. And everyone interpreted it as, well, change from the Conservatives in essence. So now you've got that change. I don't think we've got a coherent vision of what he wants to do. Because if you think when he did come in, he said his number one mission was growth. But then he increased all the taxes and put up spending and took more borrowing. And so you go, hang on a second. Well, how does that work? And if people can't see the vision of what they're working for, what they're looking for, I think that's a really difficult place to be. And if you get that vision, then everything else can fall behind it, because you're trying to say, well, how are we going to join this up? If we want to be an insular country that only looks in, well, no, we'll shut everyone out. Do we want to be the world leader in something? Well, okay, fine. What's that going to be? How are we going to do it? And so for me, that's what's missing the most as of now. I mean, you can then get into the nitty-gritty of the issues of what it looks like, et cetera, et cetera. But overall, it's a sort of nebulous concept, but actually that's what a leader should be there, and I'd expect from a prime minister.
Do you not think that in some way that having kind of set things that you are elected to do can almost be limiting, and the ability to adapt with what's going on? It's politics at the moment is so fast and rapid, and being a young person, it's like, whoa, there's a lot going on. So do you not think as a leader, it could almost be quite a good thing?
Which bit's the good thing? Sorry.
The ability to think on your feet and change quickly, as you know, it was the title of his manifesto.
Yeah, well, so yes, change, but if it's just change for change's sake,
fine.
I actually made my, it sounds really cheesy, but in my maiden speech, I talked about, I don't want to change the world, I want to solve it. Because I worry about change for change's sake, or because you've got an ideology. Actually, if you want to solve the problems, different problems will come up. That gives you the flexibility to deal with it. It's how you solve those challenges. But you've got to have a direction of where you're wanting to go with it. But interestingly, we started this conversation saying how negative it's been for 14 years. I think the Conservatives can look back and say, well, we managed to stay and win all our elections previously because we were able to stay in power and yet be relevant to the public. We've lost our way in doing that, and now we need the reset to be able to do so. I'm surprised how quickly Labour seem to have lost it, but you're absolutely right. Politics has sped up. There are so many global issues at the moment that mean you're buffeted from pillar to post, some unfairly, but some are very much in your control. And I think you've got to work out which of the two it is. And without a direction, that's quite hard.
As you said, there's an incredible amount going on all at the moment. I mean, just yesterday we had the speech from Netanyahu, where, I mean, you saw the protest of everyone coming out of the United Nations hall, and you have people applauding as well. And you have this extreme divide where you've got some people vigorously applauding someone, and you've got everyone else walking out. And I think there's this incredible polarization both here and around the world. Do you think that's something that could be almost sorted?
Doesn't need to be sorted.
I watched that and I said to my wife, what do you think of this? Because my immediate reaction was, this is the UN. This is the place where you're supposed to sort out world issues. And you're having activism on both sides happen with countries. I actually felt really sad, because for me, the whole point is to come there and try and solve the world solution. If we're not going to use that space in an effective way to hear the other side, the best arguments you hear are the people who go, look, I really like what you guys have said on the economy. I can see why you're trying to do it, but the reason it's not going to work is because of X, Y, and Z. It's making sure you have that dialogue. The UN is supposed to be the pinnacle of where that dialogue is supposed to happen. So walking in and out as part of protests, I don't think really works. And you're supposed to be leaders, stand up and say and have those difficult conversations, because it is tough. You're not going to agree, but trying to work together on that basis and bring people together rather than exclude them. It's easy. It's the temptation is to other. But actually, I think you need to step forward and say, well, how do we pull this together? Because at the end of the day, we're only one world. Where does that leave us next time? Is there going to be a stunt done from either side? And it's that one-upmanship that gets us in real problems. What do you guys think? You're young people stepping into seeing that that's the world. What does that look like to you?
It's intimidating.
Yeah, it's intimidating. I think watching both humanitarian crises unfold on your screen and then also watching things at home, literally with like housing crisis, the economy and stuff like that. I think for a young person, it could be quite frightening.
Especially when you're about to go out, and enter adulthood and go into the housing market, all sorts of things. It all feels very like, what's a lot.
I think that's a really interesting point. I spent a lot of time in the pandemic talking about this, and I had a slogan in my team. It's a common one that people use, but control what we control and forget about what we can't. Or there's a danger sometimes if you take on all the world problems, and the news is particularly bad at pushing you into things about what's happening in Yemen, what's going on with a tidal wave over in Taiwan or something like that. You see it, but you're powerless to do something about it. The environment's a really good example about that. Global warming's happening on this. What can you do? Well, actually, you can make a difference. You can recycle more. You can look about sorting your water, use your electricity in a wise way. If everyone takes responsibility and looks at what they can do, what they within their control, actually, I suddenly think that you feel in a better place. And the biggest thing in pandemic was that control was taken away. And on part of it, people felt lost on that. But also it's meant that since then, we've got this whole idea of, well, what is the government going to do about this? What's the school going to do about this? What's the health service going to do about this? Whereas actually, we can't work like that because there are limited resources. There are competing ideas. You've got to help support yourself. So how do we build a structure around people to be able to take control of their lives? Because once you do that and you start to see some direction, not only is it better for you individually, but mentally as well. It helps you get on with the life because you know your direction.
So I thought you were going to go.
I was going to ask a little bit more about the housing crisis and stuff. We've talked to other Conservatives about what the issue was. Josh has asked this question before about what we think the housing crisis stemmed from. Some people say Margaret Thatcher, some people say the lack of regulation.
Others immigration as well.
I just want to hear your voice. Like for us, I think both older people I know and even my siblings trying to either get a flat or a house seems just almost impossible. Do you think that's something the Conservatives can fix? Obviously, it's not like it's as simple as a click and it's done. It's not like some Dominic Johnson said, a magic wand for it to be fixed.
Well, I think you're right. And successive governments have struggled in this country to build houses all the way through. So I think it's easy to pick one side or the other. I can point to one of the, everyone's struggled on it. So the question is why? And with all these kind of things, it's a proper Swiss cheese element to it. We've got the immigration at the bottom end. We've got an aging population who've done well on that side. Then you've got things like inflation and the ratio between earnings and house costs from that side all counting into it. So it's how do you try and pull that apart? And I think we're doing a lot of thinking about this. I cover social care in my portfolio and trying to think a lot about, well, how can we support people? So at the top end, we've got an aging population with more people who are in big houses who don't have the family there anymore, but they've built their entire life into their house. How do we encourage them to maybe step into a retirement side or downsize? There isn't anywhere to downsize. We talk a lot about new homes. We don't talk a lot about actually homes for people to downsize who are into their 80s and 90s, who might well choose to, but there is no option for them. That would release a little bit of the housing market. I think the Conservatives did the right idea by encouraging young people and supporting them into the first-time buyers support, lifetime ISAs, these kind of things to encourage people to help to save. Then you've got the issues of the planning side of things and actually how do you reopen that? What can we do in that sense? I come from a very rural area and in that case, we want to keep that rurality, but we know, for example, that neighborhood plans, allowing little villages to put in a plan of where they want their house building means you actually get more houses built than those who don't have it. So cumulatively, it's the best way I can surmise it is, you guys remember Sky Cycling and their methodologies? It became very famous that they became so successful in the way in which they competed in cycling. I should caveat this. My brother was an Olympic sports doctor, so I follow the Olympic side, hence why I use these references a lot. And he's chief medical officer at the Lawn Tennis Association. So you see the elite way in which you have those conversations about it, and I look for synergy there. But Sky, in essence, looked at every point on a bike and said, well, let's make a percentage gain here. And cumulatively, that makes a big change. And I think we should be doing more of that, our policy, looking at from root and branch all the way through the housing side. Problem is the new government's just come in and clobbered it and said, well, we're going to do it one way. I'm not so sure that's going to work. So that's a very long-winded answer. But again, because it's a complex problem, that's not really much you can say to a young person. But actually, I think once you then were to be able to say, well, at each point in those points, you want to get in, well, we've got you more chance. We've changed the planning to be able to allow more houses to be built. We've also allowed more people to retire and move into a different space. Cumulatively, you guys can see there's a significant change that goes, well, actually, that makes sense. I understand that. You're trying to make a difference. Brits are quite forgiving to politicians if they're trying for the right idea and explain what they're doing, and yet we don't quite make it. What they don't like is being overpromised or lied to.
Let's get time check.
We got out of time.
Now, how long have we got?
We can go for 28 minutes.
Okay, should we go for 10 more? Is 10 more?
Perfect.
Is that right?
Yeah, perfect.
So you're saying it's more about kind of counting those 1% as opposed to just building more houses. It's lots of things to get.
No, well, fundamentally, we need.
Obviously, we need, but not solely that, because even that. Do you think that's enough?
I don't know. And this is it. Again, this goes back
multifactorial.
And what is it? If you have a vision of where our society wants to be, you can work our way back to it. So there is a wider question of, do we think home ownership is the right model? I personally do think it is. It's something to aspire to and want to be there. But more Europeans is much more about long-term safe rental. You need a market mix on that. But actually, if we don't have a direction of what you're trying to achieve, what is it? You guys, do you want to own your own home?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think most young people do.
Or even just to move out into a flat, relatively young would be nice.
Absolutely. So therefore, I agree, most people would want to go in that direction. That is something that gives you that security for your family, gives you security of your opportunity of where you're going. And therefore, if society we want to get there, it's how do we allow that? And that's when you come into this sort of salami approach of all these different things need to come together. Because bizarrely, I think we're going to run into a longer term problem when we've got the baby boomers all start to move on. We're actually going to suddenly get in a very odd position where we're going to have lots of big houses that all come up that aren't going to be free. So in 10, 20, 30 years time, we've got a oddity then, because you're already starting to see as well, remember our fertility rate is dropping. So you've got this weird other shift. The problem is our politics doesn't allow us to think in 20, 30 years time, because we're thinking in the 5-year cycle of what's coming next. And fair enough, you guys turn around to me and say, I want to move out, I want a flat. How am I going to get it, in the next couple of years? We've got to come up with something. So it's that short, medium and long-term strategy of where you're trying to go, I think is really important. So it comes down to the vision of what it is the UK want. I think, broadly speaking, most people want to own their own flat. They want that security. So it's how do we then provide a system that delivers it?
It's interesting you mentioned the fertility rate and we'll eventually have these big houses that aren't being sold. We spoke about this with a previous guest, Elliot Buick, about these people theorizing that we live in like a population bubble because we have in the UK, because we have such an aging population and there are less people having babies at the moment. So therefore, when all these older people go, it'll just burst. So I think you're right. We don't think in the long term as much. Do you think it's less of a priority to think in the long term at the moment when people seem quite frustrated about what's going on right now? Where's that kind of medium?
The really good question. And there's always that pull between the immediacy now and the problems you've got faced, and then trying to plan for the future. If you're a Labour politician at the moment, you'll say we borrowed all this money because we're investing for the future, for future infrastructure. But then they're clobbered by the fact that at this point in time, the economy isn't growing, taxes are going up, and people are saying, what do I get for my return? That's really tough. That's classic. Our country in the West has got into this habit of almost, I call it the X Factor culture. Go and sing a song, turn up, and you'll get £1 million contract. The world doesn't work like that. And we have to be honest about that. But you've also got to shine some light to say, well, it's not all doom and gloom. Having a plan of delivering that and what that could look like in that short, long, midterm and long-term policy to be able to say, well, we will make life a little better for you. Which is why my starting principle is always, life is hard. Doesn't matter your background. Don't fall into that trap. Yes, there's going to be differences, but everyone has challenges. The question is, as a government, how do we give you the opportunity to improve whatever you want to do? And that opportunity, should you fail, that it's not a mortal wound, you can get up and you've got another opportunity to keep going and push in that direction. A very philosophical, waffly answer, but actually
we like waffles.
Yeah, do you? It's allowed, is it? But I mean, at the end of the day, that for me is the key. If you build on those principles about it, I think healthcare teaches you a lot like that. When you see people struggling when they've had a heart attack or whatever, we want to stop them having the heart attack in the first place. But if they had, how do they make the best cells out of it? I can help them. I can't do it for them. Same principle applies here, because if government is always there to be trying to step in and do things, it can't. And it's not necessarily fair, because there'll be competing issues. If you want to rent and you want to own, how the hell do we prioritize? You've got to get a mix that allows both to happen.
I think we've a lot, like you said, we've talked a lot about doom and gloom. I think we should also talk about a little bit about optimism.
Yeah.
Do you feel optimistic
and for young people especially?
Yeah. Do you feel like there is going to be something beneficial if you're optimistic?
Hell yeah. No, I think there's a huge lot of opportunity here. This is what we're very good in the UK at looking at the bad side of things. You guys are probably a bit too young for this, but the Olympics in 2012, in the run up to that,
I was 5 years old.
The talk in the narrative about it was, it's going to be crap, it's going to be useless, it costs too much, no one's going to come, it's all going to be rubbish. We did it. It's the best thing we've ever talked about. We think it's fantastic, and we say we're the best at doing it. It's a very British thing to sort of talk ourselves down, whereas actually across the world, you look at us and go, well, Britain has a lot to offer. From our science base, we're leaders in science, biotech. We're leaders in finance. We're leaders. I was a shadow minister in the creative industries, and our creative industry is absolutely fantastic. From movies to fashion to music, there is so much opportunity out there. And I think if we breed that into young people, that there isn't that chance, the whole point is take responsibility, get out there. What is it you want to do? We'll help you along that way. That can-do attitude, that go-getter attitude is fantastic. And the more people say, oh, well, look, I can't do it because of this, or I'll work in my budget, there's an opportunity for those people who are go-getters to really take that forward. And with the likes of AI coming forward as well, people who spot their opportunities, step into it. You guys will know better than I do that the jobs market's changed massively, that 5 years ago, your jobs are what you're doing now, podcasting wouldn't really be taking off. Look at it now. Many people are making money as influencers and these kind of things. There's plenty of opportunity. It's how we give you the chance to be able to take that on.
Well, Dr. Luke Evans, thank you very much for joining us today, and ending on a more positive note than the majority of the conversation.
Fantastic, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us, and thank you all for listening.